So this afternoon I'd like to talk to you about the three centres of consciousness in the human being. And there's one we're ever so familiar with, which is the mind. And this is where we mostly think our consciousness resides. We think about the mind as being, this is where we actually live, where we are, where we move, where we have our being. It's only one of the three centres. And what I'm really going to argue in this film is that perhaps it's the least important of the three, which may be somewhat of a surprise. The second area of consciousness that I have identified and been aware of for a long time is the heart. And there's no doubt about it that if you become truly tuned into your heart, you can get some really vital insights into any problem or any situation you might happen to have. And it's a really good idea if you've got a particular issue or problem or situation and you're not sure what to do, as well as giving your mind the idea to consider, you then want to allow this idea to go into your heart for consideration. And now this is the way that I experience it myself. If I'm faced with a new idea and I take it to my heart, then what I do is I simply imagine the idea going to my heart and then I wait. And in that place of waiting, what I ask myself is, how does my heart feel? If my heart is feeling openness, expansiveness, warmth, or pleasure, this is a really good indication that my heart is in alignment with this particular thing I'm thinking about. If I get anxiety, a fluttering sensation, a coldness or a contracting feeling, then I know my heart is basically saying, no, your heart's not in it, Keith. So that's a really useful way to be able to check into your heart. It's simply a matter of giving yourself the time, tuning into the heart and allowing the heart to give you some kind of response. Now, the third area of consciousness is what I want to focus on in this film, and it's a relatively new idea for me, and it's about the vagus nerve. Now, when you see the picture that you're going to be shown in a moment, you will see that the vagus nerve is really quite elaborate. It's much larger than you might realise, and in fact, it seems to have branches of nerve fibres extending all the way into this rather large rectangular area on the diagram. Now, that relates to your gut. So the vagus nerve is a repository for us human beings of our gut sense and our gut feelings. And this is, I feel, perhaps the least understood and the least explored part of our consciousness. And the idea is, if you look, particularly you look at biology, you look at the evolution of different life forms, you'll discover that in the animal kingdom, the vagus nerve is a very important part of our development. So I'm now thanking Christopher Bergland, and this is an article in Psychology Today which came out in February 2013, so it's a nice new article for you. And what he's done is he's come up with 7 effective habits to nourish your vagus nerve. But before I go into that, let me just take a couple of steps back and explain the way things work. The vagus nerve, when you are in alignment, provides you with this wonderful quality which is called grace under pressure. Now, if there's one thing we all experience in our lives at different times, that's feeling under pressure. So I'm going to give you straight away a simple breathing technique which will enable your vagus nerve to calm itself down. And you'll find that a calm vagus nerve supplies you with this very elusive and mystical quality of grace under pressure. So let's just think about what the opposite is. The opposite of grace under pressure is when you're anxious and you're worried, when you don't quite know how to perform. Performance anxiety is all about the opposite. So when the vagus nerve is not in a state of calmness but is in a state of agitation, and we're all familiar with different situations, maybe the boss might be pressurizing us to get something done super quick, or maybe we might have our own deadlines, or maybe a person is engaging in sex and they're feeling anxiety. These are all the situations where the vagus nerve needs some assistance. So here is the simplest way that I know of to enable your vagus nerve system to calm down, to provide you with grace under pressure. And this is what you do. It's a variation of a breathing technique I share with people on the shamanic and plant medicine retreats that they come on. It's a simpler way of doing things, and this is what you do. So you start off by an exhalation, and you breathe in through your nose. Nice long inhalation. Pause briefly and you exhale by blowing as if through a straw like this. I'll do a full cycle this time for you. So what am I doing when I'm doing this breathing technique? What I'm doing is I'm slowing down my breathing rate quite drastically. And in normal state of awakeness, you might find that you're doing 12 or 15 or even more breaths per minute. But when you use this method, you'll take it all the way down to 6 breaths per minute. When I'm doing this, I find I take 4 breaths per minute. It means you're breathing deeper, so it means that you're getting the gas exchange, the oxygen's going into the deepest parts of the lungs, and the old carbon dioxide from the deepest part of the lungs is being removed, and that's why we do that breathing through the straw, like that. It actually slows down the exhalation forcefully by having a diminished area through which it can pass out. So doing that will automatically put your vagus nerve, your gut instinct situation in your body into a place of calmness. And by achieving the calmness, that gives us the grace under pressure. So if you've got a new idea, you can go through the mind's observations about it. You can then check out with your heart, and then doing this simple breathing exercise, even if you only to do 3 inhalations and 3 exhalations, that's very, very little, it will still make an appreciable difference to your state of conscious awareness. And if you can give yourself the time to do 10 full inhalations and full exhalations, and you notice with this technique the gaps are very short. When you fully inhale, it's just a short gap. When you fully exhale, it's a short gap. It's not like the usual method I teach. So it's much simpler, much easier to do. This then enables you to check into your gut feelings, and literally, when we're considering this idea, you literally put your awareness into your lower belly and you just think, so how does my lower belly feel? And it's going to be a bit of a similar story when you think about it, because if your gut is feeling tight, feeling tense, feeling anxious, after you've done this particular breathing technique to calm down the vagus nerve, you know that your gut instinct is not in favour of this course of action. If, on the other hand, you get this feeling right deep in your gut, I want to do that. That's the way I describe it. I describe it as I want to do it. If you get that I want to do it feeling down in your gut, you know that your gut is in alignment with this particular idea. Check it out with the mind, check it out with the heart, and check it out with the gut. And this is a really helpful way for you to be able to process developments in your life, new changes, new opportunities. So I'm now going to go back into the text and give you some more things you can do to help your vagus nerve to get even more into the state of grace under pressure. Right, so here's the first one. The first idea is simply to visualize your vagus nerve. Now, in most situations, this would be quite difficult. You think to yourself, well, what does it look like? Well, we'll show you the picture again. That's a picture of the vagus nerve. That's actually what it looks like. So what you can do when you've got this thing that you want to consider and check out your gut feelings, you do the breathing, and the next thing you're going to do is you actually visualize the vagus nerve. Look at the complexity of that nervous setup that we've got there, and by simply visualizing it, that will tune yourself in even more to the consciousness of the gut feeling. Right, so the next one is to align the cerebellum, which is the part of the back of the brain, right at the back of the brain, right down where my fist is pretty much. So by harmonizing and aligning the cerebellum with the vagus nerve, this is a very useful thing to do. And the way that we do this is, in any activity we want to become good at, what we do is we practice, practice, practice. Supposing you've got an important interview, the best thing you could do would be to take yourself off, have some time off, and practice the questions, practice the answers. By doing that, you're automatically aligning your cerebellum with your vagus nerve and getting yourself into the grace under pressure state. Practice, practice, practice. It's as simple as that for that one. And the third one is to do with what is called balancing skill and challenge. In our lives, there are things that we're good at doing, and we can get very comfortable with those, but there's other things we're not so good at doing, or we're not so practiced at doing, and those actually represent our challenges. Now, this might seem like a strange thing to say, but what the advice is here is, in your life, to balance doing the things you're good at with deliberately going out and challenging yourself to do things that you don't normally do. That's actually a really positive thing, and it's going to enable your vagus nerve and your gut feelings to become even more honed and even more developed in your system. So this is the third thing, is balance out doing things that you're familiar with the things that are unfamiliar to you. Take on challenges. Very, very useful. Number 4 is to reframe priorities and values. So this means to say that it relates a little bit to number 3, but any reframing exercise is inviting you to look at things and see that you've got certain well-established ways of looking at things, and it's inviting you to look at things from a different perspective. That's actually what reframing means. It means to look at things from a different way. And one of the simplest things to do as an exercise, if you just get any object that's unusual, when you put it on a little table or a little desk in the centre of your room or space, and you look at it, and then you get up and you go and stand 90 degrees from where you were sitting or standing before and look at a different side, and then walk around, look at it from 180 degrees, then walk around from 270 degrees. You're looking at the same object but from different sides, and that's a really physical way for you to get into the idea of reframing your skills and your priorities. Number 5, perhaps the most obvious one of all, but in any situation that you want to look at and get in tune with your gut feelings, it's very important to spend some time deliberately focusing on creating positive feelings about whatever the subject may be. So that's what you're being advised to do in this particular one. Simply look at all the positive implications that that new idea could possibly have for you. And it's worth taking a bit of time on this. You might have the obvious advantage for doing it, but take a little bit of time out to have a little bit of lateral thinking about it. Think of what other positive benefits could there be from this particular idea. So just to recap, all these suggestions that are being given are all going to be helping to get yourself more into a state of grace under pressure just by spending more time thinking positively. Number 6, definitely my favourite, which is every day make sure you engage in some physical activity, whether it's aerobic exercise, whether it's walking up and down stairs, whether it's doing yoga, going to the gym, just going outside for a walk, going swimming. Whatever physical activity you do in the way of exercise is enormously stimulating to the gut, which benefits all those peripheral nerves, which actually extends out into the vagus nerve and therefore contributes to your grace under pressure. So increased cardiovascular activity increases grace under pressure. And here's the last one, and you're going to think, come on, does he really mean this? But I really do. In order to foster a really good state of your vagus nerve, then what you are recommended to do is to practice as often as possible loving kindness. In whatever opportunity comes your way, you might be walking past a person selling the big issue and you maybe don't have £1 to give them, but what you can do is you can give them a smile. When it comes to waiting in a queue in the supermarket to buy something, rather than getting pissed off and anxious that you've got 2 people in front of you, you could think, well, I've just got the opportunity to stand here and wait in line. And when it's my turn to come to the checkout and to pay for my goods, I can just give the person a smile. Focusing on the smallest details of loving and kindness actually already enables that whole vagus nerve gut feeling system to calm right down. And that's really the point I want to emphasize, is it's the calm vagus nerve situation which will give you really strong gut instinct. And a strong gut instinct literally can save your life. I'll give you one example where my gut instinct kicked in, which is I was swimming across a river estuary in Portugal, and I noticed that I was moving closer and closer towards the sea, and the current of the river was quite strong, and I thought, if I'm not careful here, I'm going to find myself swept out to sea. And my gut instinct told me to do something which I thought was mad. It said, put your feet down. So although I was swimming, I put my feet down, and I discovered that actually I could touch the ground, and I was able to wade out. Such a little thing, if I'd left it a little bit further, I'd have been out into the depths and maybe I would have been swept away. So gut instincts can literally save your life in the dramatic sense, and they can be very, very useful in terms of what is the best next step. Sometimes your gut instinct will say, I've been working at this problem for 4 hours now, what I need to do is to get some exercise. Just go outside, just for 10 minutes. That's the sort of thing that you can discover through listening to your gut instinct. So this is an interesting one. The other advice that's given is to be really careful and cautious about spending too much time around negative people. People who just want to bring you down by the way that they speak or the emotions that they radiate. There's a really strong piece of advice here which is given to you, which if you want to cultivate your gut instinct, deliberately avoid spending too much time around such people, because it doesn't do you any good in the long term. which means to say, if you take the thing to its logical conclusion, do things which nourish you emotionally, do things which nourish you physically, and make sure also that your social interactions nourish you. Sometimes you might have a job where that might be quite difficult. I think of someone I know who works in an institution for people with dementia. That can be a very difficult task to take on. In a situation like that, that person needs to make sure that their other social interactions are very positive and uplifting, and that will help to balance themselves out. So I'm very encouraged from my learning experiences about the vagus nerve, and I'm going to give you the reference of the guy one more time. So it's Christopher Berglund, and his article was in Psychology Today, 2nd of February 2013, and you can look it up on the internet if you want to find out all the details about it. So I'm inviting you to make friends with your vagus nerve, and first, last and foremost, do the breathing. Just for a few minutes before any activity you've got to do which requires extra effort, extra concentration or application, and you'll find that you've got grace under pressure, which is a really nice way to respond to anything that life might throw at you. Thank you very much. So we just want to link in with the fact that there is the long Angels film, and the price on that one has been reduced down to $2. So if you'd like to explore angels in some depth, you're most welcome to do so with that film. And the link is in the description. Thank you very much.